Bonjour.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to meeting 31 of the Standing Committee on Veterans Affairs pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and the motion adopted on November 25th, 2025. The committee is meeting as part of its study on the follow-up to the Rehabilitation Services contract awarded to PCRVS.
To consult the guidelines written on the cards on the table. These measures are in place to help prevent audio and feedback incidents and to protect the health and safety of all participants, including the interpreters. I would like to make a few comments for the benefits of witnesses and members. Avant de prendre la parole,
Before speaking, please wait until I call on you. If you're participating via video conference, click the microphone icon to turn your microphone on, and then please mute yourself when you are not speaking.
Your screen, you can select the appropriate channel for interpretation, either floor, English, or French. For those in the room, you can use the earpiece and select the desired channel. Before introducing our witnesses, I would like to touch on a bit of housekeeping. Earlier this week, a draft budget was distributed for our upcoming study on the main estimate 2026-2027. Is it the will of the committee to adopt the budget? Thank you. J'aimerais souhaiter maintenant la bienvenue.
I would now like to welcome our first panel of witnesses.
Wellness. Mackenzie Scarf, Manager, Clinical Services by video conference. From Mine Spa Mental Health Center, Michelle Masunken, Clinical Director. And from the Veterans Transition Network, Mr. Oliver Thorne, Chief Executive Officer by video conference. Each witness will have 5 minutes to give their opening remarks. We will then proceed to a series of questions with the members of the committee. I would like to invite Mrs. Mackenzie Scarf. The floor is yours for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mackenzie Scharf. I'm the Clinical Services Manager here at Broken Squirrel on Vancouver Island, and we have been providing services with the PCVRS contract to veterans in our area. My role is overseeing the clinical programming, supporting the referrals, and supporting the providers and veterans as they navigate the rehab pathway. I'd like to start by acknowledging a few aspects since working with PCVRS that are working well. In our experience working with the case managers, they've generally been very responsive, collaborative, and open to the clinical input from our team. We have had opportunities where treatment requests are initially declined, and we do find that there's often a willingness to reconsider when additional rationale is provided. So we do believe that this does demonstrate a level of flexibility and respect for the clinical judgment of our team, which is extremely important when it comes to complex care. Additionally, we have seen working with PCVRS a level of adaptability in the scheduling and the service delivery, being in a smaller area on the island with limited resources to clinics that also hold the contract. They have been quite flexible in allowing us with our interdisciplinary rehab programs and single services to schedule in a way to meet the needs of our community and our veterans. So we really do believe that these strengths are important and worth preserving in any negotiations going forward. At the same time, we would love to take this opportunity to share some challenges that we see at the clinical level with the intention of contributing to ongoing improvements in the system for the veterans that we're supporting. And that by identifying these areas, we can just continue to work together to reduce barriers and better support the veterans that we're here to serve. So one of the most pressing challenges we do see is inconsistency and a lack of clarity in the standardized processes. There's often some confusion around workflow requirements, such as when approvals require VAC involvement versus when decisions can be made within the PCVRS level. And we do see that this uncertainty can create delays and administrative burden for the clinics, and it can also make it difficult for the veterans to understand and navigate their own care. We see opportunities to strengthen the communication between PCVRS, Veterans Affairs, and the treatment providers. So at times when veterans are receiving updates about approvals or denials before the clinical team is informed or able to support, it can be unsettling, particularly for those receiving psychological care, as it can impact trust and leave the providers unable to support their clients in real time. Another area of concern that we do see is delays in care. So the process of submitting recommendations, undergoing review, requiring VAC approval, and then returning decisions through the system can sometimes take several weeks. And during this time, veterans may be left without active support. So in some cases, they're encouraged to use alternative benefits such as Medivie, but even when those benefits are intended for maintenance rather than active rehabilitative care. So it raises important considerations around continuity and appropriateness of care from our perspective. Particularly from our counseling team, there's concerns around the reassessment process for psychological conditions. It can be demanding and at times counterproductive. Frequent reassessments can contribute to withdrawal from care or worsening of symptoms. Many veterans are already experiencing anxiety related to evaluation, and the repeated assessments can reinforce the fears of losing support if they are perceived as improving, which makes it challenging to celebrate the great progress that they do make while under our care. Additionally, the timelines associated with rehab and VOC programming don't always reflect the complexity of the individuals that we're supporting. Many veterans present with multifaceted physical and psychological conditions that require longer-term flexible approaches, and rigid timelines can unintentionally increase the stress and overwhelm rather than supporting their recovery. We also observe some variability in the level of support veterans receive from their case managers. So while many provide excellent guidance and advocacy, the differences in approach can lead to inconsistent experience for the veterans, with some feeling well supported and others feeling uncertain about the next steps. The administrative complexity can be an ongoing challenge, with many veterans experiencing difficulty navigating paperwork and processes independently due to the cognitive or mental health concerns. So without the adequate support, this can delay care, interrupt the continuity, and increase their feelings of isolation. So greater clarity around the available supports for these administrative requirements would be beneficial in helping the veterans remain focused on their recovery. So Thank you. So streamlining our communication pathways, reducing delays in approval processes, and clarifying the roles are some areas of improvement that we would love to see happen going forward with PCVRS. And thank you so much.
For 5 minutes, Mr. Thorne.
Thank you. Hello, thank you for the opportunity to speak today. Aux membres francophones du comité, je m'excuse.
Hello to the French-speaking members of the committee. I apologize, but my testimony today will be in English only due to time constraints and the specialized language involved.
My name is Oliver. I am Chief Executive Officer of the Veterans Transition Network, a charity that provides group counseling programs for veterans of the Canadian Armed Forces and RCMP. For over 25 years, our programs have helped men and women in uniform address the challenges of service-related mental health and the transition to civilian life. Today, we offer these programs across Canada in English and French for men and women, always free of charge. As Canada refocuses on recruitment, supporting veterans' well-being, and successful reintegration, services like ours will be more important than ever in providing trusted, community-based support where it's needed most. We have been a registered service provider to Veterans Affairs since 2012. This means that Veterans Affairs Canada will cover the cost of eligible clients who attend our program. Historically, this eligibility and funding approval process has been complicated and inconsistent, meaning we often serve Veterans Affairs clients without Veterans Affairs funding. So when it was announced that partners in Canadian Veterans Rehabilitation Services would take over this program administration, we were optimistic that the problem might improve. My testimony today will focus on why it did not and why that matters for veterans care more broadly. When PCVRS was contracted to administer the vocational rehabilitation program, we were instructed by Veterans Affairs to register with them as a service provider. We initiated that process in February 2023, and it took 2 years and 4 months to complete. Over that period, we sent 16 messages to PCVRS, 14 of which received no response. Our point of contact changed 5 times, and with each change, no information was handed off, meaning that we essentially restarted the process every time. When we were finally given the option to register a year into the process, we were told that we could do so either as an affiliate provider or an out-of-network provider. The affiliate status came with administrative requirements that we were not confident we could meet as a charity with a small team and still maintain our client-centered focus. So we chose to register as an out-of-network provider. Another year later, in June 2025, we were informed that the registration was complete, but that as an out-of-network provider, PCVRS was unable to refer any veteran clients to us. This was never disclosed during the registration process. So in total, it took 28 months for PCVRS to inform our charity that they would not refer any veterans to our evidence-informed program that has been serving veterans successfully for over 25 years. The flaws in this process are not just administrative inconveniences, they have real consequences for two important issues related to veterans care in Canada. The first is accessibility. We've appeared before this committee many times, and our message is always consistent. Veterans are a unique population, and supporting them requires programs that are specialized, culturally competent, and accessible. Based on all our conversations with veterans and other service providers, PCVRS has significantly narrowed veterans' freedom of choice and their access to available programs. Instead, they favor lengthy assessments and a structure that funnels veterans towards their preferred affiliate providers. We would be interested to know if there's any reason PCVRS has favored or streamlined the process for some providers and not others, and whether that's a previous relationship, formal partnership, or terms and conditions that weren't clearly communicated to all. The second reason this matters is preparedness. Canada is significantly increasing defense spending, and the Canadian Armed Forces is expanding recruitment and operational activities domestically and overseas. The downstream consequence of this is predictable. More Canadians will come home from service needing effective and accessible supports. This challenge is not new. We have seen it before. Following Afghanistan, tens of thousands of men and women came home to a system that was not fully prepared to meet their unique needs. That gap was a driving force behind the creation of our charity. And this challenge is not theoretical, it is happening now. We are already working with veterans who served on Operation Unifier and Reinsurance, men and women with exposure to trauma and moral injury from those operations. As a national service provider, we're preparing now for a future with greater demand, and the broader system of veterans care in Canada needs to be prepared too. That means removing barriers to care, not building them. This committee has an opportunity to correct a serious structural problem before it compounds, and so I ask the committee to do three things. First, investigate if there are previous professional or financial relationships between PCVRS's affiliate providers and its parent companies. Second, review whether the out-of-network designation is excluding proven independent service providers, and if so, why. And finally, to act on that information and ensure that the system governing veterans' care allows access to specialized, culturally competent supports without unnecessary barriers. Thank you.
Now for 5 minutes, Mrs. Masunkin.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. Thank you for the invitation to be here today. To briefly situate my perspective, I am a trauma therapist who has been working with veterans, CAF members, and RCMP members for the past 17 years. I'm also a clinic director at Mindspa Mental Health Center, an affiliate within the PCVRS network. Since joining the network, we have supported nearly 100 veterans across Quebec, Ontario, and parts of Atlantic Canada, both virtually and in person, services being offered in French and in English. Our virtual model has also expanded access to veterans in rural and remote communities who might otherwise face barriers to care. Over the course of my career, I have seen the rehabilitation program evolve from a system that was coordinated directly by case managers to the current PCVRS model. Today, I'd like to offer a balanced perspective, what's working well, and where there are clear opportunities to improve. To start with strengths, I have seen improved access to care, particularly for veterans in remote regions. Many are now able to connect with appropriate providers more quickly without having to navigate the system on their own. This has reduced barriers and allowed veterans to engage in treatment sooner. For example, I recently worked with a VAC case manager to coordinate care for a veteran who was not yet on the rehab program. Scheduling that initial appointment took several weeks. In contrast, under the PCVRS model, once a rehabilitation specialist is involved, appointments can often be arranged within days. That difference in timeliness is significant, particularly for veterans who are in acute need of support. We also saw this early in one of our first PCVRS participants, a veteran who was incarcerated and who would typically face significant barriers accessing care. Through the program, he was able to engage in treatment while serving his sentence, and we saw clear, measurable improvements in his mood and his overall functioning. When the model is working well, I have seen strong multidisciplinary collaborations with coordinated care across providers. I also see standardized reporting practices and the use of outcome measures to track progress and to inform the care. That said, one of the most significant challenges I experienced early on, and one that continues to be echoed throughout the committee and some of the testimonies we heard today, is a lack of clarity and education around the nuances of the program. This lack of clarity, if left unresolved, has real clinical consequences. In response to that, I have made it a priority to maintain open lines of communication between our team and the PCVRS team, including Peter Adams and Karen and Dr. Bourgeois. We have received support when clarification is needed. Closely tied to this is a fear among veterans of being cut off from the program or losing access to services. While the structured, time-limited nature of rehabilitation is intentional and important, it's not always clearly communicated. As a result, some veterans experience the program as rigid and high stakes. I want to emphasize that the system can work well when flexibility and clinical judgment are applied. For example, I worked with a veteran medically released for PTSD who had already completed a comprehensive assessment. A reassessment was not clinically indicated as it could risk destabilizing her. Through collaboration with her VAC case manager, we readjusted the plan and moved directly towards a determination of diminished earning capacity. This is an example of the system working as intended, but it required advocacy and a level of clarity that isn't always made available to veterans or providers. At its core, what I'm observing is a model with strong foundations and clear impact, with opportunities to enhance how it's actually experienced on the ground. The program is already working for many veterans. The opportunity now is to build that success and ensure that it works consistently for all. In closing, PCVRS represents an important evolution in how rehabilitation services are delivered. It has improved access and introduced greater structure and coordination. For it to reach its full potential, it must be clear, consistent, and well understood. When those elements are in place, the program has the capacity to be truly transformative for the veterans it serves. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. We will now start our first round. Each of our members will have 6 minutes. And as I say to those online, I apologize in advance if I have to interrupt you. I'm going to be very strict on the 6 minutes for each of our Member of Parliament. We will start with Mr. Richards for 6 minutes.
Thank you. I'm going to ask each of you, first of all, just looking for a yes or no response on this. I'll start with you, Ms. Musunkin, and work onto those on the screen. Prior to the contract with the PCVRS, did you or your organization provide rehabilitation services to veterans? Yes, just a yes or no on that, please.
No.
Okay. Ms. Scharf?
Yes.
I'm not sure if she's... Oh, she said yes. Okay. I didn't hear that. Okay. And Mr. Thorne?
Yes, the majority of our Veterans Affairs clients are on the VOC Rehab program.
Okay. So the next question I've got would be for you, Mr. Thorne. I was obviously struck with your testimony regarding your efforts to become a provider or continue to be a provider. Mentioning that it was 2 years and 4 months, 16 messages, 14 of them unanswered, 5 changes in your point of contact. And at the end of all of that, essentially what you found out was that what you were applying to become was meaningless because you couldn't actually serve veterans as a result. I guess what I'd like to ask, and maybe I'll ask Ms. Scharf as well if you can follow up following this, but the question I guess I really have is what kind of effect does it have on veterans when someone that they've worked with, a trusted provider, and then they're being told, you know what, we're going to have to change you to someone else because, obviously this process that you had to go through, Mr. Thorne, is so difficult to navigate for these service providers, and in some cases they're not even able to, no matter what they do, get approved, as you've experienced. So let me actually ask this first. If it was that tough for you, like you're a pretty significant veterans service organization, you guys are pretty significant. And what is it going to be like for a small clinic somewhere to try and go through that process? Like, it's got to be even more difficult for them. It took you 2 years and 4 months. So that's the first question. And the second one is, what kind of an impact does it have on a veteran when they're being told you're going to have to switch providers just because this program doesn't seem to have a process to enable the provider you had before?
Yeah, thank you. So a couple of points there to address. I think the first is, what is it like for a small clinic? This is
Second, we are having some technical problem to hear you, unfortunately. So I know, I think, yeah. So we're just going to see. So what you didn't hear is Mrs. Gaudreau is having great sound, unlike some of us who are listening to you in English, unfortunately, that we're having a lot of... So maybe...
Je suis désolé. Sure. We started off the day with sunny skies and decent temperatures, but it's getting cooler. I'm told that there's rain coming later on in the day. How's that?
Apologize to have to haven't had to interrupt you, so maybe just start your answer as Mr. Richard was asking you the question.
Yes. Okay. Thank you very much. So maybe I'll address 3 points. I think the impact on us, the impact on small organizations, and the impact on veterans. So first, I should be clear that this does not mean that we can no longer receive Veterans Affairs funding. We still can apply for that approval process through Veterans Affairs and Medivie directly. It remains challenging and inconsistent. Our hope was that the involvement of PCVRS as the organization managing the administration of vocational rehabilitation, which is the majority of the Veterans Affairs clients we serve are on the Voc Rehab program, we were hoping it would streamline. It has not. It's been difficult, if not often impossible, to speak to them. The majority of that 2 years and 4 months is just extended periods of silence where they were not responding to any of our messages. And over that period of time where PCVRS took over the contract, I can say that our approval rate for Veterans Affairs clients dropped by 30%, even though we continued to see the same number of Veteran Affairs clients. The impact on the veterans for our organization, in a sense, is minimal because we will never turn them away if they are not funded by government funding. We will draw upon the generous donations that we receive from Canadians, foundations, charitable institutions to make sure that the program stays accessible. But the result is that we can run fewer of these programs because the systems that the government has in place are not sending the money to us for the government clients that we treat. We'll never turn them away because we know that 2/3 of the folks coming to our programs have considered suicide very recently. But the impact then on small organizations, and in particular the impact on mission-driven organizations like ours, who only spend 15% of every dollar on administration, we don't have a large administrative team that can focus on a 2-year application process and going back and forth with these folks. We spend 85 cents of every dollar we have on veterans care because that's what our donors expect. That's what, as a charity, we should be doing. But we are then not able to contend with this massive process of administration that some other providers may be better able to contend with. As a mission-driven organization that has to keep a lean overhead, we cannot. And I believe that that will be the same impact for other charity, nonprofits, and mission-driven organizations.
I go to Ms. Scharf on that same question. Can you, Oliver, can you give us a sense, what would be the fix? How do we fix this?
It seems to me that this is perhaps an extension of the problem that we have seen in Veterans Affairs as well, that the systems are not well established to recognize a wide variety of different types of service providers. They're pretty astute at recognizing what a counseling clinic looks like, but with a national organization that is registered in 8 or 10 different provinces with various colleges, all of the differences that come with that, the fact that we deliver an inpatient program that doesn't occur on a weekly basis, this is where the system seems to be challenging for us to be integrated into the existing system. They're good at recognizing clinics. They are bad at recognizing specialized services like ours, is my admittedly limited take, because we have received so little information from PCVRS in this process.
What's been your experience in terms of the difference?
I was just remind me, you're 15 seconds over time already.
Okay, I
so
guess
we will have
we'll
to
get a
go
chance to
next
ask you in a
round. I
future round.
apologize sincerely again for Mrs. Ertl for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Scharf, I'd like to start with you, please. I understand that you worked for several years at Nighting Wing Comox in recreation and fitness roles. Can you tell us what you observed during that time about the wellness needs of serving members and their families?
Absolutely. So I was PSP staff while I was there, so I will admit that I was limited in my knowledge of what was available for members following their release from the military. I can speak to, again, kind of being in the fitness area with them. There was a lack of, at the gym, we did have opportunities for veterans to come in and use the services at 19 Wing after they released from the military. We did find that there was a disconnect, that once members did leave, coming back into the gym was triggering. It was very challenging for them to feel a part of the active serving community. And as a PSP member, we would get questions while administering the force tests for individuals that were not meeting the requirements to continue or who were exploring medical release. Personally, I did have a lack of knowledge of what was available ongoing after they did release, but certainly saw that there was a disconnect from that community and more of a social isolation once they did release from the military.
Thank you. So while you were at the base, then what were the kind of day-to-day issues that you saw coming up, mental and physical health?
From the physical health perspective was probably what I had the most experience with. So we would have members that were completing their force test who were also recovering from chronic injuries during their time in service. So we would see them for remedial PT to help support them back to be meeting the physical requirements of the testing that we had to administer. Past that point, though, I didn't have any support ongoing with them in that process. It was strictly from the personal training perspective, my time there.
Fair, thanks. So what supports were readily available on base, and were members able to find help off base? Are you aware of that, or any idea?
In my role, I was not. It was strictly with the personal training programs, the remedial PT. We did have a PES, so a physical exercise specialist that would support members who had more chronic or complex challenges that were going on. But again, outside of that physical training role, I was not aware.
Thank you so much. I'll switch now to Ms. Musunkin. A couple of questions. Thank you. Where am I? Based on your clinical experience, ma'am, including your work at Department of National Defence, what has your experience been working with veterans seeking mental health care?
I think one of the things I've noticed is the transition piece is one of the things that come up most often. Identity, adjusting to life as a civilian, navigating the healthcare system as a civilian versus those who were working as active service members. So that's one of the main things that I would see is navigating the nuances of being a civilian.
Okay, that I can appreciate that for sure. So did you notice similar needs amongst veterans that you'd been working with?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest things we explore is grief around identity and who am I now, and having to navigate, again, getting simple family doctors, for instance, or even the healthcare system. But those are things that I often see both with those who I served with or worked with before and who I work with now.
Right. Okay, thank you. As you mentioned, a virtual program, I believe, as well. So can you explain, are there differences? How are there differences between an in-person session or program and the virtual program that you would have offered?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're in a stage now where virtual healthcare or virtual mental health care can be as effective as in-person mental health care. I think at this point, it's almost being able to realize that having access to the support is the most important piece versus no support at all. There are some interventions, perhaps like EMDR, that are preferred to be done in person, but can still be offered virtually as well. And so there's a lot of similarities with the virtual versus in-person care.
What was that acronym, EMDR? Can you explain what that means?
Yeah, so EMDR, it's eye movement desensitization reprocessing. And so it does use a couple different tools like light bars, but the idea is to engage in bilateral stimulation. So that can be done virtually, just showing the client how to do that on their own.
Okay, that's really cool. Sounds cool. I'm more of a meditation kind of gal. So I guess if you, in the 30 seconds we have left, you talked a lot about some of the challenges. What suggestion are there one or two suggestions you could make that would improve the service?
I think having clear expectations and having that be outlined clearly to the veterans who are entering the program in terms of what to expect as you enter, or if you decide to enter into the rehab program, managing those expectations, I think will be very important, as well as on the case manager side as well, because they often have the initial contact with the veterans before they are entered into the program. And so I think informing the case managers as well as the veterans very early on what the program is and what the expectations are of the program.
Thank you very much. For the next person, Madame Gaudreau will address you in French. So I would invite each of our guests to make sure that you have the earpiece and the proper language. Madame Gaudreau, pour 6...
Ms. Gaudreau, you have 6 minutes. Thank you, Madam Chair. So based on what I heard from Mr. Thorne, he said that veterans are a unique population. So I would like to ask you, and I will start with Ms. Masukin, is this true? Are veterans, are they a unique population?
Absolutely. I would say that they are a unique population. They have a culture of their own. Their experiences are different than that of civilians. And so I would definitely agree that they are a unique population for many reasons.
Merci. Et Madame.
Thank you. Ms. Scarth.
Yes, I would agree as well. From what I see with the veterans that we support in clinic, they are a group of folks who have become incredibly resilient in the job that they have done to support our country. And what I see is that resiliency does not directly translate to the workings of day-to-day civilian life. And that poses a lot of challenges for that reintegration back into their day-to-day.
Monsieur Thorne, pourquoi?
Mr. Thorne, why are veterans a unique population? I would like you to explain that a little bit more in detail, please.
Absolutely. Thank you for the question. Well, there are many different ways to look at it. I think first and foremost, veterans are a unique population because they have deeply unique experiences. The job that we ask them to do is unlike any or many others that occur in civilian society. We see elements of similarity with culture between those who serve in the Canadian Armed Forces and those who serve as first responders, so those as firefighters, paramedics, police. But perhaps where that path can fork in the road is that veterans have a very unique culture. The process of becoming a soldier is a deeply personal and transformative process of entering into that culture, of meeting the needs, the demands of the job, the work that they do as a team, and the team spirit and the collectiveness that they. There's one quote I can think of where somebody said, I found myself after leaving in the Canadian Armed Forces, I found myself in a place where the notion of we hardly exists. So this idea that to move from a culture and environment where there are such clear expectations around how one behaves, how one interacts. Another veteran talked about the idea they could look at somebody's uniform and they could tell they knew everything about them by looking at that uniform. They could tell where they could serve, they could tell what their rank was, what element they were in. So they knew instinctively by looking at somebody's uniform what their relationship was to that person, where they sat within the structure, the hierarchy, the overall mission, and the operations of the Canadian Armed Forces. And then they come into civilian life and they try and distinguish one blue suit from another. But, and Ms. Scharf talked about this, but and Ms. Masukin as well, the idea of transitioning from that highly specific culture and way of life to one that has none of those elements and comparatively just absolute chaos and disorder from the perspective of somebody who has served is an incredibly difficult psychological and social process for anybody to navigate. And now let's layer on top of that a traumatic injury or a moral injury or depression, anxiety, PTSD because of the things that they've been asked to do or witness overseas in defense of our country or in defense of our freedoms, responding to natural disasters here in Canada. That is an incredibly difficult process, and culture is an enormously important part of connecting with and helping people to navigate that process. If they are not understood, they will not trust, and they will not be able to go into those experiences and address the trauma, address what has happened if they do not feel they can trust the person sitting across from them. And the trust can only emerge if there is a level of connection and understanding of their experience, which is why military cultural competency is so important.
Thank you very much. Ms. Masukin, I would like to hear what you say. We're talking about trust and we're talking about a unique population. And we're being told that, you know, if they're being told that they have to change service provider at times, how can we support these veterans properly if this relationship of trust, it's what can happen to those people? You know, they kind of get thrown here and there are delays, there's a lack of clarity. What are the consequences?
The consequence of that is the lack of continuation of their care and of their support. I think once they have established that trust with the provider, the likelihood of them improving in their symptoms continues to grow. When that's disrupted, then we'll see a disruption in their wellness. And so I think that's a significant part of it. I think in terms of building on that trust, especially because it's such a unique population, back to the point Mr. Oliver made around competency, and ensuring that there is a level of cultural competency in understanding the uniqueness of the military culture, understanding the importance that that culture has in terms of how they're managing their symptoms, especially if it's a trauma symptom or a moral injury symptom. But being able to understand the culture allows for there to be better engagement and better support offered to them as well. But that trust comes when the culture is understood.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
Sorry.
Now we will start our second round for 5 minutes. We will start with Mrs. Wagenthal for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Thorne, you've been here many times. I want to just cut straight to the chase here. You made 3 recommendations that you felt needed to be addressed. So many veterans are struggling because they've lost their providers. They have to do assessments again. It's a very difficult environment. And you also brought up this first one, that relationships between providers that exist now with PCVRS, there needs to be an investigation as to how and why those particular relationships are there. Can you put that into words that you would say is a recommendation that we could give to this committee to send to the government?
Thank you for the question. I think the recommendation centers around trying to gain a greater understanding of how affiliate providers who receive referrals are selected. We were presented simply 2 options, and without a lot of clarity as to what it actually meant to choose either one of those options. And in the experiences we've had speaking with veterans in our network and with other providers, we have encountered a lot of confusion about how affiliate status is assigned and how it fits with the existing services which have been serving veterans for years, sometimes decades. I think our recommendation is to understand more clearly how that process occurs and if there's an existing relationship of some kind between PCVRS and some or many of those affiliate providers. Hopefully that offers some clarity.
You spoke a little bit about that out-of-network experience, kind of. I interpret that as meaning you don't fit. Is that basically it? And I will say about your particular, incredibly effective, and across the country, you also have an advantage that, yes, you can fund without, and you would not turn someone away. When an organization like VAC or PCVRS has that option, that concerns me, that you aren't treated like all of the others. So is that what you're referring to, that needs to be reviewed? Why in the world is that even there?
Yes. My confusion is that a program which is researched, evidence-based, run by licensed mental health professionals, has a 25-year history, and has been built from the ground up, specifically to support the mental health of veterans from service-related injuries and transition, that somehow does not qualify for referral. And I think that is because, once again, the model is a good fit for clinics, but in a way, perhaps some of the things that, because we are built from the ground up to be accessible to veterans, to be national, to be bilingual, to be gender specialized in our programs, those things almost make us a bad fit for the existing classification or taxonomy system that PCVRS have. I think that's an issue. Because we're national, because we don't fit the model of a standalone clinic, that we do not fit their criteria to be an affiliate provider. Well, those are the things that make us a specialist veterans provider, quite frankly.
You mentioned that maybe the problem is, like, you are mission driven. Does that also mean you are not profit orientated, and maybe that's a problem? Like, I'm trying to decide, why is it that you're saying being mission driven is a problem, it seems, which is irrational?
Because I think it's an issue because we keep a very lean administrative staff, a very lean overhead, and that structure is part of the reason that we felt we could not consistently meet the requirements, administrative requirements of an affiliate provider. So we chose out of network, but again, it was not made clear to us what the distinction of that choice meant, that one option meant that we would get no referrals whatsoever. But to answer your question, no, we are a nonprofit, we are a registered charity.
I have just 10 seconds left. I would certainly like to see your organization have the role that it should have within VAC's perspective and PCVRS. So thank you for being here again today.
Thank you.
Now for 5 minutes, Monsieur Saint-Pierre.
For 5 minutes, Mr. Saint-Pierre. Thank you. I would like to ask a question to our 3 witnesses, and I'd like to follow up on my colleague's question. Is it appropriate to group the specificities of veterans in one single group? I'll ask Mrs. Masukin first.
Is it appropriate to group them into one single group? I think that we always want to be able to look at each individual's presenting concerns and presenting needs and treat them accordingly. Despite there being some similarities and some common threads among the groups, there are always going to be differences amongst them, and it's important to take those into consideration.
Puis peut-être pour vous, Madame Scharf.
And for you, Madame Scharf.
Yeah, I think there's definitely such differences even when you start to narrow in on the population. Just as we are unique human to human, the experiences that these men and women go through, they are affecting them as they come home in different ways. You can look at the spectrum of mental health diagnoses that we see amongst our veterans that come into the clinic, how it presents, how they are moving through that, how it's impacting their life. It's so unique case to case and can be so complex when you look at all the layers that go into it. And so I think that's really a challenge when it comes to really trying to standardize rehabilitative care. While I understand there is a place where it is helpful from a treatment team as well as giving structure to the person receiving care, there needs to be an element of flexibility that honors the complexity and the depth to which these folks are affected, and having care that is here to support them until they are getting back to that place where they feel they can integrate and have a quality of life.
Et puis, Monsieur Thorne, est-ce que tu veux faire un commentaire?
And Mr. Thorne,
Yes,
do you have a
thank you.
comment to make on
The
this?
short answer is no, we cannot treat them as one population. I think if providers do not recognize military culture and the military population as a unique population in itself, they're doomed to fail. But within that, there are many considerations for the populations that exist within the Canadian Armed Forces and veterans. So our programs are women's programs across Canada. They are adapted programs because 60% of the women we serve have experienced military sexual trauma. That is a reality of the population we serve. That is a reality of that population within the Canadian Armed Forces. And so we must adapt to it both culturally and programmatically. Our French programs are not just translations. They are cultural and programmatic adaptations to specifically address the unique challenges that veterans in Quebec struggle with. Je vais dire ça en français, je suis désolé en avance, mais c'est une bulletin breton que nous pouvons offrir le même niveau de
We want
service
to be
pour tous
able
les
to
anciens
offer
combattants.
the same
combattants
level
Canada.
of service to all veterans across Canada.
Masquin?
I'll get back to you, Madame Misikin. From the point of view of mental health from your organization, what kind of types of factors influence positive results within veterans?
That's the question. Okay. What type of factors influence?
Yeah, what kind of factors positively influence the veterans?
What factors? I would say having community would be a positive factor that influences their wellness from a mental health standpoint. And so whether that's a social network or community network, something similar to what they were used to while they served, but that's a huge and significant part to their wellness. Having that social support, again, being able to lean on that social support in different environments has been a significant aspect, I would say, to their wellness.
Je vais essayer une autre question en français. J'espère que
Maybe another question in French. I hope you don't mind. Are there any obstacles that stop veterans from getting to mental health services such as the kind that you propose in your own clinic?
I feel like we've done our best to work through some of the barriers. And so whether it's a language barrier or a geographical barrier or a regional barrier, we've done our best to be able to identify that. I think one of the biggest barriers that continue to exist for some would be the stigma around mental health and accessing mental health care. And what would this say about me? Whether this is a sign of weakness or what this might bring up for me. I think that's one of the biggest things that we've seen is the stigma around the mental health care and accessing that care.
Il reste 15 secondes. Okay.
I have 15 seconds.
Can you elaborate on that quickly in 10 seconds?
Yeah, I can do my best. We are unclear as to, we would like a review of whether proven established service providers are being excluded from veteran referrals because they have been designated as out-of-network providers. That's what we're requesting. Thank you.
Very much, Mr. Thorne. Now we will go to Madame Gaudreau pour 2 minutes et demie, for 2.5 minutes.
For 2.5 minutes.
Merci beaucoup.
Madame Gaudreau in French. Thank you very much. So this week I asked a question to the minister, which was before systematically renewing this contract for another 6 years, was it necessary to do an independent investigation with the ultimate goal of making sure that the service providing are doing exactly what they're supposed to do and they are exactly what the veterans need. But in the meantime, things are going far too quickly, and you have expertise. I don't understand what sort of work you do exactly, but I'm listening. And if there is one thing that we should change one by one, I'll start with Mr. Thorne. What should we be doing right now before even getting the results of the investigation and changing things for the PCVRS? You have a few seconds.
I think any policy changes that relate to an increase in the accessibility and the range of choice that veterans have in the programs that they can access. And that's input from the veteran, not only from their rehab specialist.
Madame Scarf?
Madam Scarf?
The access to care. Being a small community, we see a very high volume of veterans. We do our best with a small team to support as many as we can. We are also in a community that has expert and incredible clinicians. We have clinicians that these veterans are already attached to, where a therapeutic relationship and trust is developed that is critical in healthcare to keep those relationships. And so opening it up beyond just specific clinics and specific providers is going to eliminate the amount of veterans who are considered to go into gap while they are awaiting services for our caseloads to come down.
Yeah, I would echo many of that.
Thank you.
The access piece, the flexibility around piece. And so when it comes to assessments, is that required all the time, or are there flexibilities around what that might look like for individuals? And so in addition to flexibility, I would say accessibility and flexibility for what that looks like for individuals entering the program.
Très apprécié.
It's very much appreciated. Thank you.
Last round, we'll go 3 minutes and 3 minutes to stay respectful for the other panel. Donc, pour 3 minutes, nous allons passer.
So for 3 minutes, we'll now go to
For 3 minutes.
Madame de Ryder.
I'll start with you on the first question. Was it easier to intake veterans that need support before or after the implementation of this program? And what has changed?
So I have been with our clinic for 2 years. I was not working as the manager before the PCVRS contract was taken on, so I can't speak to that. I can speak to currently it is a lengthy process from the time of receiving a referral to veterans being connected to the supports that they need. It is a big administrative process for the reporting that the clinicians have to do. There's also certain parameters around the referral booking process of how a psychology physician and physiotherapist need to be coordinated with respect to coordinating different schedules of a clinical team. Being able to meet the parameters can sometimes cause delays in the assessment process being done sooner. And so that's kind of what we see post with the
complicated process. So I think I'll go to Oliver then, just quickly. What is your intake process?
Sorry, are you asking about our intake process for clients, or specifically in dealing with PCVRS and funding approvals? So our intake assessment process is fairly simple. It's designed to be accessible. It would first take place a conversation with one of our program coordinators. That would be a local program coordinator in their region. We'd talk about the content of the program, if they feel that it's a good fit. If the veteran is interested and motivated to attend a program, they then do an intake assessment with the clinician, psychologist who will be running that program. Typically takes about 45 to 60 minutes over the phone, and that's it.
So then I'm going to ask you, Oliver, you have a lot of experience with working with veterans struggling with crisis and injuries. Do you believe adding this complicated bureaucratic process has been counterproductive to helping veterans who are suffering as it stands today without implementing change?
I can only speak to the specific veterans that we serve and interact with, but I would say it has been counterproductive thus far. Yes, we're seeing an increase in confusion, an increase in the burden of assessments on veterans, and a decrease in the choice and autonomy that they have in their care plan.
How much time do I have? Okay, so a very quick question just to follow up then, because you believe it has been counterproductive. A piece of that I see is, do you think that forcing veterans to change service providers after they found a service provider that they can trust can actually cause more damage?
100%. The trust, once again, is one of the biggest issues, one of the biggest challenges for veterans coming forward and seeking help. We've heard from other committee or other witnesses about the stigma, the fear of being misunderstood, of not having their experiences and their culture understood. And so, yes, changing is bad.
Mr. Thorne, for 3 minutes, Mr. D'Entremont.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Just trying to get some numbers, trying to figure out how many veterans are we helping. The whole idea of this study is to understand the responsibilities of PCVRS, but quite honestly, it's how many veterans are we actually helping? How many are coming for help? How many are we helping? And maybe how many of them are running into problems? Right. Let's try to understand that challenge. So maybe I'll just go through our witnesses today. Mr. Scarf, how many veterans are you helping? Like maybe how many are on your group, and maybe how many of them are coming in with challenges with PCVRS?
Right offhand, I can share that we have 23 folks who are currently in our interdisciplinary rehab program. One of our occupational therapists on top of that has a caseload of 20 single service occupational therapy clients, and our physiotherapist has around 20 physiotherapy clients as well. That's just 3 of them off the bat. I would say the majority of folks coming in are expressing frustration with a lack of clarity of the direction that they're headed, what the next steps are, challenges with the self-advocacy for the administrative pieces of having to do these parts on their own. And we do our best to support them through that and be that bridge between them and PCVRS to soften that burden as much as we can so they can focus on their care.
Thorne, kind of the same question, even though I know you've got a larger group of veterans that you have been working with for a very long time.
So we serve about 220 to 250 veterans a year, depending on the number of programs we can deliver. About 2,500 to date have graduated through our programs. And yes, we also consistently hear challenges in the process of approvals, assessments, and options from the veterans we're working with regarding PCVRS.
Madam Mr. as well.
So we have approximately 100 veterans on the program. In total, we have close to 250 veterans. Some are on, some are not on the program. Of those who are in the program, we've had a few who have concern, again, as I mentioned earlier, around the clarity or understanding the program and what the expectations are. I do meet with our clinicians every month just to disseminate any information that I receive from PCVRS to them, just so that they're well aware of the changes or clarifying any questions that they might have had from the clients.
When it comes to actually dealing with PCVRS, is it done through phone calls? Is it? I don't know much about how the interactions of it. Is it emails? Is it how is that interaction actually happening?
It's usually a Teams meeting for me. I can only speak to my experience, but usually it's a Teams meeting, and so I meet with the manager every 8 weeks just to be able to give any updates or ask any questions that the team might have about the program. And so typically it's a Teams meeting, but in between there I can email, and they're quite responsive as well.
Okay. Thank you.
I wanted to say thank you very much to our 3 witnesses, our 3-person this morning, this afternoon. Thank you very much for your time, and on this we will adjourn for next panel. Suspend.
Hello, everyone, again.
Avant de prendre la parole, attendez que je vous nomme, s'il vous plaît.
Before speaking, I would like to ask you to wait till I name you. If you are on a video conference, please click on the microphone icon to activate your microphone. Please mute yourself if you are not speaking. Regarding interpretation, for those of you who are on Zoom, you can choose between French, English, or the main microphone for those who want to. I would now like to wish a warm welcome to our second panel of witnesses. Speaking in a personal capacity, Madame Anne-Marie Pinard, who is a physician. She's coming to us by Zoom.
And Madame Elizabeth Forbes, registered psychologist by video conference. Welcome. Chaque témoin aura 5 minutes.
Each witness will have 5 minutes to speak, and after that, we will go for a series of questions with the members of the committee. So, Dr. Pinard, the floor is yours for 5 minutes. Thank you very much for having invited me. I am Anne-Marie Pinard. I am an anesthesiology specializing in chronic pain at the CHU in Quebec at University of Laval. For the last 14 years, I've devoted all of my time to caring with people with chronic pain. I'm also a full-time professor at University of Laval. I'm also a researcher at the Interdisciplinary Research Center for Rehabilitation and Social Integration. And every year, I see 10 to 12 veterans in my clinic who are struggling with chronic pain. Usually, over the years, I have learned to understand and respect military culture. Veterans in armed forces have often lived through very difficult experiences, not just when they were deployed. They are overrepresented among those who are living with chronic pain. And in the population, generally speaking, it is about 20% of the population who is suffering from chronic pain, and 50% among female veterans. Mental health issues are also very common, especially those who live with chronic pain. 60% of them have mental health issues, whereas in the general population, the overlap between pain and mental health is about 30%. In my work, I'm very fortunate to collaborate with an interprofessional team. And in complex cases, we assess the patient and develop an individualized progressive treatment plan, and we share this with the patient. Chronic pain is not just simply pain that lasts and lasts. It is a complex phenomenon, often involving more reactive nervous system, an accumulation of fatigue, variable exercise tolerances, sleep disturbances, past traumas, all which have left their mark. And in this context, the best practices rely on fine-tuning, gradual progression, respect for limits, and a genuine integration of mental health. I've had a lot of experience with interprofessional rehabilitation programs. About a dozen years ago, in a rather rigid framework that left little room for modification, patients that were more complex were often set back by these kinds of rigid programs. Gradually, they have disappeared because their effectiveness was very limited. And the mental health aspect was often rarely taken into account. There were neither psychologists or occupational therapists or people specializing in mental health working with them. But what I have observed in the last few years, but I do say this with a bit of caution, is that there is a tendency to replicate this logic, which is rigid and standardized. Now, for the last few years, and since the creation of the PVRS, I have observed a significant deterioration or an impossibility of collaboration, long delays of assessment and access to service. And in my experience, this assessment is rarely conducted by a team that includes a physician with a good understanding of military culture and chronic pain. But once the program is started, it is very difficult to influence its content, its intensity, its frequency, even if the clinical situation deteriorates. This logic of one size fits all, which had been abandoned by the equivalent of the WSIB in Quebec. And it is an imposed model with an inappropriate level of service intensity, which exacerbates the problem. Too often, veterans must travel long distances to get appointments. Driving alone can increase perceived pain and reduce attendance. In fact, you need to have proper training for these kinds of programs when it comes to managing chronic care. especially when it comes to military culture. I think that we also have to improve our transparency and and the decision and all of the documents. I really hope that you will be able to have the opportunity of hearing the points of view of people who work with veterans, people who work with in the clinics, and who work with operational stress, and the managers as well, because they are the people who are totally aware of the consequences of the system. I'll just finish with this very simple image. We should never offer the same size clothing to all veterans saying, this is standard, just adapt yourself. But somehow I feel that this is what we do when we impose the one size fits all model. A fixed intensity and a rigid trajectory on people whose clinical realities are very different. Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Pinard.
Thank you for the opportunity to appear today. My name is Elizabeth Forbes, and I'm a trauma psychologist, and I work both in Alberta and British Columbia. I've previously worked in the operational stress injury clinic here in Calgary, and I now operate a private practice focused primarily on veterans experiencing post-traumatic stress and related conditions. I regularly support individuals who are navigating both psychological treatment and the rehab system under the PCVRR contract. My comments today focus on the clinical implications of rehabilitation timing, system structure, and alignment with trauma-informed care. Trauma treatment for PTSD and related conditions typically follows a phased model of care: stabilization, active treatment, and maintenance, which results in a gradual return to functioning, and then vocational success can be considered. From a clinical perspective, a key concern is how and when rehab services are introduced and whether or not they align with the current phase of treatment that the veteran is in. Vocational processes, such as the initial assessment and related meetings, are often described by PCVRS as neutral. However, clinically, they involve evaluative and performance-based demands that can activate the nervous system in trauma-affected individuals. PCVRS in my clinic is often introduced during the stabilization phase, when therapeutic relationships between the veteran and myself is already well established, and at a point when the individual may not yet have the capacity to tolerate these additional demands. In practice, this can result in treatment and rehab pulling in two different directions, which can be very difficult for the veteran to manage, as they are required to engage in destabilizing demands while also attempting to stabilize. This often results in increased distress, heightened suicidality, and worsening of other symptoms. Over time, the rehab process itself can become associated with threat detection. The anticipation of contact or required participation may repeatedly trigger the individual's stress response, and in this way, the system is not experienced not only as unsupportive, but as a recurring source of distress. Continuity of care is also a concern. Individuals are often encouraged to transition from established community providers, such as myself, to providers within the PCVRS network. When a therapeutic alliance is already in place, disrupting that relationship, particularly in trauma treatment, can result in reduced engagements and many setbacks in progress. For some individuals, this may be experienced as a breach of trust, particularly in the context of institutional or relational trauma. Another concern relates to system coordination and accountability. In my experience, there is very limited integration between rehab planning and an established psychological treatment plan, resulting in parallel processes that are not aligned in timing or priority. When clinical recommendations are not integrated into a broader plan, care becomes fragmented. Veterans may receive conflicting directions, which can increase distress, reduce engagement, and interfere with treatment progress. More broadly, there appears to be no clear mechanism for clinical recommendations to meaningfully influence rehab planning, even when clinical risks are clearly identified. This creates pressure to engage despite clinical contraindications or limited capacity, and financial necessity overrides clinical readiness. At a broader level, there is a mismatch in approach. Rehab framework emphasizes activation and progression, while trauma-informed care prioritizes stabilization and readiness. What this looks like in practice is that individuals become overwhelmed, their symptoms increase, they begin to withdraw, and progress made in treatment is disrupted. In trauma-informed care, it is the system that needs to flex to the veteran, not the veteran to flex to the system. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Forbes. Now for 5 minutes, Mr. Morrow.
Great. Thank you, Chair, again, for inviting me for a second time. Clearly, the first time around wasn't too bad. So I was on my way here from Montreal. And on the drive here, I had a nice speech that I shared with everybody here, but I realized it wasn't the right tone. It didn't capture the language that I really wanted to discuss. And I really think there's a language or an inability to really communicate with each other, because I speak a language of duty, honor, respect, service. The government speaks a language that is based on policy and governance and laws. And the reason why I bring this up is because I'm part of an exclusive group, a special minority, one might say, the 0.01%. I invented it myself. 0.01% is approximately how many Canadians have actively been engaged in combat, fought an armed enemy. I'm one of those privileged few, along with my brothers and sisters in arms. Now, there might be more, but go with me on this. The reason why I bring this up is because when I was patrolling in Afghanistan, kids would come up to me, and I was with an American unit, so I was the only Canadian there with a maple leaf on my shoulder. And they would say, "Canada good, America bad." And I would go, "Oh man, wow, okay, kid, like, thanks, man." But that kid has no contact with the outside world. So he intrinsically knew that there was some added virtue for being Canadian, and that's the pride that I had when I signed up. That's the pride I had going to war. And so when I had to do Canada's dirty work, the expectation when I came home as a young buck in my 20s was that if I need help, the government, VAC, Canada will provide the care that I need. Unfortunately, I guess maybe out of naivete or just not enough time in when it comes to life experience, that never really materialized when I took a knee and I needed help. Now, care for me means something. I'm a father. I have 2 beautiful kids at home. When they hurt themselves, when they need help, I ask them, "Hey, what's going on? Are you okay?" And anybody here has kids, you know the rest. My expectation of care was like a father's care and a father's love from his country. But since that never materialized, I believe the best way to describe it was or is a broken heart. I love my country, or loved my country fiercely. I was willing to die for my country. I did the country's dirty work along with a lot of our brothers and sisters. And now, through contracts like PCVRS and being managed and processed through a company that is owned by American private equity and Loblaws, who sells us apples and oranges, to go through that process was demeaning and dehumanizing, I'll be honest. And so I don't know where we stand right now, to be honest. There's an unwritten contract between soldiers and our country. And that contract is not being honored. And so I'm not expecting this contract to be canceled, I'll be honest. I'm not expecting the government to really do anything more, to be honest. Only because I recognize that this language difference hasn't been resolved. Not enough Canadians know who we are. 0.01% is so few, it barely even registers. So that being said, my expectation is actually for my fellow veterans to actually start talking, to put our boots back on, to start fighting again, just not in a dusty war zone. Here, we need to advocate for ourselves with policy and good decisions. And so the easiest way to do that is simply to start talking to your friends. Get out there, send a message to me. I'm easy to find. And let's start building this together. Because as far as I can tell, VAC's responsibility to care is not being met. They are bound by the Veteran Charter to look after our veterans. and it's not being done. So the issue is not PCVRS, in my opinion. It's not Manulife. It's VAC. And why doesn't VAC want to take care of its veterans? That's my only question to the council. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Morrow. So we will start our round of questions with Mr. Richards for 6 minutes.
Thank you. Mr. Morrow, thank you for your service. And I know sometimes those words can sometimes sound hollow and meaningless. And I think based on what you heard, what we just heard from you, I want to just also say thank you for your willingness to be frank and your bravery that you've shown doing that. Because I know that for many veterans, it's a struggle to do that because they're afraid the consequences they'll see in their benefits and things like that. So that was much appreciated that you were willing to be that frank with us. It's sad that you have to do that because, as you said, when you went and served our country, our job is supposed to be to make sure that you're taken care of with what you need. And as you say, for yourself and far too many veterans, that's not happening. My first question, I guess, for you would be, well, I mean, let me start with this. What would an ideal rehabilitation program look like in your mind for our veterans?
I don't know if we have enough time, but
fair enough.
I'll explain it as succinctly as possible. And I know what it is because I did it myself, and I did it before PCVRS existed. And if it wasn't for the VTN, I don't think I'd be here. So I'm glad that Mr. Thorne was here because that was part of the piece, part of the puzzle that I had to put together on my own. I had no help from VAC. PCVRS didn't exist. So it included getting the help that I needed, but actually finding programs that work for you. So that's stabilization phase. VTN is probably the best program in Canada. I talk about it all the time on my show. After that, I focus 100% on fitness and health because unfortunately the rehabilitation process does not incorporate fitness and health as part of the process, which is absurd. We're not looking at the cellular problems that we have as veterans. I'll give you an example. GWAT veterans, so Global War and Terror veterans, myself. We experienced more combat load than any other generation in history, simply because we were exposed to war every day we were in theater. We were on forward operation bases. We could have been rocketed, vaporized, shot at every day, so we're always on alert 24/7. World War II veterans got pulled back to France. They got pulled back to England. They knew you could only sustain so much. Some guys, I did one tour. Some guys did 3, 4 tours. The amount of combat load on the central nervous system is way too much. The average Roman soldier only saw 2 to 3 days of combat a year. Those are the Romans. We experienced, in my case, I experienced over 260 days of combat. So in a rehabilitation world that actually is effective, we need to look at the cellular issues, and veterans aren't broken, they're under-recovered. So that takes a whole team of people to kind of figure that out and to make it individualized and not just focus on the psychology of veterans, but also focus on the physiology of veterans. And we can go into all the different modalities that there are available to veterans at this point.
Okay. I think I know the answer to this question, but one of the questions I wanted to ask you was, do you believe that the Department of Veterans Affairs has ensured that there's sufficient oversight on this PCVRS program? And I guess anticipating your answer, follow-up would be, what does it need to do better?
Unfortunately, I don't know why VAC abdicates its responsibility to other organizations when they're mandated with the care of veterans. It's a slap in the face, I'll be honest. If they can't do the job, figure it out. Like I said, care is, hey, what do you need and how do we support you? We know it's not going to be perfect, but for it to be farmed out to a private equity firm that is American owned and to know that their goals are based on corporate policy, obviously not based on care of veterans, we're not incapable of doing an internet search. We know this exists, so we know that this is disingenuous. They're not trying to make us better. They're trying to achieve their corporate goals. So the first thing would be stop farming the care of veterans out to private equity firms and insurance companies. That would build a lot more trust within the institution, in my opinion.
And then I guess the other thing I'd like to ask you about is the bureaucratic processes, whether they be within VAC themselves, whether they be dealing with PCVRS or the coordination or lack thereof between the two. What does having to deal with all that all those processes and paperwork and bureaucracy and overlapping elements of it do to a veteran, especially one that's already struggling?
For me, it was emasculating, simply because you have to constantly talk about your issues with people that are not really qualified to listen to them. And you think initially that they're trying to help, and then it's just another step that you just didn't do. You constantly feel like you're failing. That's not rehab. That's not care. It's just one form after another. It's one individual informing you of one policy, but it's not correct, and then constantly have to go back and redo things. The amount of inefficiencies in the system is absurd. So we're taking it upon ourselves as veterans to start figuring this out on our own. So we've created our own groups to figure this out, because VAC doesn't even know. That's the problem. VAC, when we talk to them, they don't even know their own policies. They don't know the law. I would argue that most have never read the new veteran charter. So that being said, like, what are we doing here? And why aren't there more veterans involved in the actual planning process and oversight, which is essentially why we have all these problems, because we're being told what we need when, in fact, it should be the other way. It should be the bottom up, not top down.
Well, thanks again for your service, and thank you for your frank and excellent advice today.
My pleasure.
Thank you very much. For 6 minutes, Mr. Casey.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thanks to our witnesses for being here. And Mr. Morrow, good to see you again. And at the risk of it sounding hollow, thank you for your service, sir, and your testimony, which was particularly compelling. I'd like to start with Ms. Forbes. You drew, I think, a very clear distinction between trauma-informed care and a rehabilitation framework. So I'd like you to expand a little bit more on that, because it's my understanding that PCVRS is only involved and only engages you if there has been a determination made that the client or the patient is someone who is seeking or is involved in a rehabilitation program. I understand the difference between trying to get someone better and trying to rehabilitate them. So treating them as opposed to the rehabilitation path, which ideally reaches a goal at some point as opposed to stabilization. But I'd like to hear from you a little bit more about how is Veterans Affairs Canada, or PCVRS, to do they actually have a mandate for trauma-informed care or stabilization, as opposed to the working through getting someone rehabilitated?
Thank you for the question. I'm not quite sure if I understand. I apologize. It's more around the difference between a rehab perspective versus a trauma-informed care perspective. Is that it? Yes.
Yep.
So in PCVRS, the rehab often focuses on action and taking action and getting going and let's get back to work and all of those kinds of things. Mm-hmm. There's nothing wrong with a rehab program. The issue that I have is these mandatory assessments, programs, engagement in PCVRS are often at times where veterans are not ready. They're not ready at all for another system. Trauma-informed care talks about, we talk about slowing down. We talk about not overwhelming your system. So when they're introduced, especially early on in treatment in my clinic, it is so very destabilizing. So what happens is I'm pulling back, trying to stabilize my client. I actually have to pause the treatment, because what happens is PCVRS is activating them. You need to do this. You need to have this assessment. We need to see where you're going. We need to know what you need to do. So they actually work against each other. So what I usually do is I have to pause my treatment and deal with the fallout from what happens in the system because of a lot of the things folks have mentioned today. I could just nod and say, yes, that's the case. So I hope that answers your question. As far as what their policies are on trauma-informed care, I couldn't speak to that. I know what I can speak to in terms of how I'm trained and what my specialties are in this area. So hopefully that answers.
I'd just like to ask it a little more concisely. I understand what you said, and you are addressing what I'm getting at. But my question is a rehabilitation framework and trauma-informed care, are they mutually exclusive? Can they coexist? Should they coexist in your treatment of a patient?
Understood. Thank you. That's a great way to reframe it. So prior to this current model, VAC case managers functioned more as coordinators of care directly with treating clinicians, whether it was in the OSI, whether we were community psychologists, and we determined timing and readiness together. So rehabilitation services were introduced more flexibly, and we were typically aligned with wherever the client was at. So if I get a call from a case manager and they say, how is this person doing? Can we move them on to this stage? It was a conversation. There are no conversations with PCVRS. They do not respond to any of my emails, faxes, phone calls. And I guess I should clarify, that's not quite true. I would say most of my communications. So that is time. It's a timing issue, but it's also, they're not understanding that they're actually contributing to this veteran's distress. And I've tried to have conversations, meet with higher ups. I'm also an affiliate provider, so that creates an added barrier for me, and especially being a community psychologist as well.
Dr. Pinard, je regrette que je n'ai pas plus de temps pour,
Dr. Pinard, I regret that I don't have more time to have a conversation with you.
Mais pouvez-vous m'indiquer le niveau de votre
But could
contact
you
avec
tell me
PCVRS?
the level of your contact you have with
Vous êtes
PCVRS?
spécialiste médical.
You're
Je
a
suis
medical
certain que vous
specialist,
avez une équipe. C'est
and I'm
quoi
sure that
le
you have a
niveau
team.
de communication
So
entre
what kind of
vous
communication
et le
happens
fournisseur?
between you and the provider? Thank you for the question. The answer is that there isn't any. Like Ms. Forbes, when I've patients who are referred to our program, then I'm unable to have any discussions with the healthcare professionals who are taking care of my patients. And I had exactly the same experience. For some patients, I had to stop what we were doing at our pain clinic because our patients were completely exhausted. I'm sorry, Dr. Pinel. I'm sorry that I have to interrupt you. And now for 6 minutes, Ms. Gaudreau. Thank you, Chair. So what I understood, and I'd like to talk to Dr. Pinard, not only when we're in a vulnerable situation and when we need specific care because we're a unique population, that we need to fight to have a continuum of care. And at the same time, we want to promote everyone's well-being. And it's like we're being told when we come to the ER, oh, you're having a heart attack, but you have to fill out some forms first. So I'd like to hear from you on how things happen when you meet with your clients who are struggling to get service from PCVRS. Well, my patients are referred by their family doctor or sometimes by a specialist. And whether it's civilians or military personnel, it's very difficult to access chronic pain care. The wait lists are very long, and currently in Quebec, there isn't really an organization that allows you to get around the waiting list, even if you're a veteran. I regret that that's the case, but that's the way it is. Once the veteran arrives at our clinic, most of the time, we don't know beforehand that it's a veteran. We learn that it's the case at the first meeting. And sometimes I learn it 6 months later because people don't tell me. And in that case, I have no way to find out. I just learn by asking questions. But sometimes we learn this very late. And sometimes our veterans are already in a rehab program. or they're taken care of by another team within PCVRS at the same time as being at our clinics, and everything happens in silo. All the care is provided separately. There's no consideration of the fact that they're already accessing a pain clinic, and in our pain clinic, we're not able to provide long-term care. We can't provide 2 or 3 physiotherapy sessions every few weeks. Beforehand, we had an ability to come up with a joint plan, and we were able to recognize the difficult experiences of veterans. But now with the new way of doing things, things have become very rigid. There's very little communication, as Ms. Forbes said, and sometimes this really undermines what we're trying to do with the patient. And I've had to stop something that I was actively developing, whether it's for medication, for mental health care, because my patient was completely exhausted by the program. And in the military culture, we do as we're told, and that's a unique feature of it. So people end up getting exhausted. And just like Ms. Forbes described, people get exhausted. And then it's hard to have the energy to do other things, to use other strategies. So this has happened a number of times. I've had to say, okay, we're going to take a break. And once you're done your program, you can call us back and we'll give you a few weeks break, and then we'll restart to where we left off. Often there's very little access in terms of mental health. We do a follow-up, and then a third program is added, and it all gets very weighty. Another issue I'd like to mention is the question of distance. Often our veterans live away from urban centers for a number of reasons, and the program is maybe 50 kilometers away, and driving requires a certain cognitive, or is a certain cognitive load. This adds to everything, and all the paperwork. In our pain clinic, we don't always have to fill out all the forms, but it's quite a bit of paperwork that we have to do, and this is just a small number of the forms they have to fill out. And I'm asked if my patients are dealing with incontinence, and I'm a pain specialist, so how do I answer this? So it gets really difficult. We have to access previous medical information. I understand it's protected. It's very difficult to take care of people because these endless processes exist, and we end up repeating things that don't work. So it's all very difficult, and it really undermines the quality of care that we're able to provide.
Je suis bouche bée encore une fois, mais ce qui me rassure par contre.
Well, something that reassures me is that we understand that there are laws, and but know that everyone wants the things to go well, and we want, in this context, for things to be better. But this requires a certain will.
Forbes.
And I'd like to hear from Ms. Forbes in a few moments. So the word care, as Mr. Morrow said, do you feel that this program is really taking care of veterans? 30 seconds.
Mrs. Forbes, the question was okay.
I apologize. I thought it was for the other. That's a tricky question. Honestly, I don't. I see it as such a huge barrier that I feel like there's just so few individuals that sign up for their jobs that they could potentially die as part of their role. And veterans do this so willingly for our country. And that level of sacrifice just really warrants something much greater. A level of care that's responsive, that's actually listening to its providers, whether we're in big clinics or whether we're in community, and something that's respectful and that really understands their needs. And I just have not had that experience with PCVRS.
Mrs. Forbes, for now 5 minutes. Mr. Tomey.
Thank you to our witnesses for joining us today. Ms. Pinard, I appreciate your comments with one size does not fit all. I think we've brought that up in committee before. And Ms. Forbes, I really do appreciate that your experience is bridging two provinces, Alberta and British Columbia. Mr. Morrow, you've called for a full-scale independent audit of this program, and the minister has now committed to an independent review. Based on what you've experienced, do you believe a review overseen by VAC can be independent? And given that VAC designed the contract, set the KPIs, conducted no audits, and has defended the program's performance figures at this very committee, what would independence actually require, and what should we be watching for to know if this review is genuine?
Thank you.
I always ask good questions.
Yeah. I think you already know the answer, but the reality is, how many veterans are forensic auditors? Because that would be, I think, the best way to get it set up. Get a team of veterans who are independent, who are outside. If they want to constantly do internal investigations, okay, well, how about we get a bunch of veterans to do this investigation? Aside from that, no, I don't trust VAC as far as I can throw them. So this is not going to be objective in any way, shape, or form. And we can see it for what it is. The veteran community will see it, again, as another dog and pony show, as we call it. And we'll just shake our heads and let the politicians do their politician stuff, but we still don't have the care that we're actually looking for. So I don't have any faith in it if it's not independent, meaning we have an independent body that is outside at arm's length from the government.
Right. Okay, so you opened up your testimony with the difference in military culture and the difference in political language. So duty, honor, service, respect. And in the political world, it's governance, law, policy. But with VAC, there's also administration. So there's a requirement for administration to follow governance and a vision. And I would like to get your thoughts on that. What do you feel? Do you feel that, the tail's wagging the dog, or the dog's wagging the tail here?
That's a good question. I mean, if I could get eyes on and see, like, under the hood what happens at VAC, all I know is, as a user, as an end user, it just seems it's very chaotic. So, because the reality is, things didn't get bad until I went to PCVRS. VAC, well, they lost my trust at one point with an incident. And like was mentioned in the last testimony, trust is so important for our community. And like, if I go back to my 0.01% analogy, our whole job was to distrust literally everybody we came across, from little children to men, whether they had a weapon or not, they could kill us. So coming home, we distrust everybody, and we distrust the government, and we distrust. So as soon as you break that trust, it does a lot of harm. So to answer your question, I don't know. Is the tail wagging the dog? Maybe, but I don't have a good enough answer to kind of point you in the right direction, to be honest.
So we have no confidence in the review. We're not sure of the operation of this organization. Do you believe that this is going to get turned around after the audit?
No.
Independent review.
No, and like I mentioned during my initial 5 minutes, I think the only way this gets fixed is veterans need to take charge, and we need to organize so that we can actually share our voice reasonably with government. Because it seems like you're operating in a dark room. You don't know what you don't know because you don't talk to us, because there's nobody to talk to except me individually. But we don't have a room of 100 or so veterans speaking through our spokespeople saying, these are the things that we need to fix now, like they do in the United States. If we can start establishing that, and I know it won't be for our generation, it'll be for the next generation of veterans that probably aren't even born yet, that they could benefit from an advocacy arm of veterans.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Morrow. I appreciate your time.
Thank you very much. Now for 5 minutes, Mrs. Hurtle.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Dr. Pinal, je vais demander mes questions en anglais.
Dr. Pinal, I'm going to ask my questions in English. My apologies.
If you had chance to finish your response to my colleague, Mr. Casey's earlier question.
I guess I will answer in French because it's easier for me. Oui, j'ai répondu dans la.
Yes, I was able to add these things in my previous response. It had to do with the fatigue caused by the program and caused by the issue of distance that I mentioned in responding to Mr. Casey.
Well, merci. So,
thank you.
About the types of experience you've had with veterans seeking care or assessments, please.
Bien, à la clinique de la douleur.
Well, at our pain clinic, as I mentioned, people are generally referred to us by their family doctor or by a specialist. The first issue is there, at least in Quebec, there are many veterans who don't have a family doctor, who don't have access to one. So that's the first problem. It also applies to civilians, but it's particularly bad among veterans. It's very difficult to have access to this frontline care, and if we don't access frontline care, then it's difficult to access the second or third lines. And then there are wait lists, which are very long, as I mentioned. And once veterans come to our clinic, very often, because we're more of a civilian clinic, we're in a location that doesn't so much respect the operational stress experienced by veterans. We're in the city, places with a lot of people, with ill-suited waiting rooms, and sometimes staff members who are not aware at all of military culture. So that's an initial obstacle. And then there's the assessment and all the delays associated with that. Then there's the difficulty of accessing rehab care as well as integrated mental health care. The integration of our services with, for example, the TSO clinic depend on how familiar we are with one another as opposed to with an established link. We send texts or emails just to talk to people there as opposed to having something really integrated. That's the same thing with PCVRS, unfortunately.
Are there common needs amongst the veterans that you've worked with?
Je pense que le premier besoin.
I think that the first common need is recognition, the recognition of this different culture, of this reality. And I often say to my veteran patients, I'm just a civilian. I can try to understand your reality, but I haven't experienced it. So we need to touch on this subject with a lot of humility. People need to be better educated on military culture. I've been working in the area for 25 years, so I've met with a lot of people. So I think I'm pretty decent. But this is a common need. Another common need is being told, as we mentioned, we care. That's very important. And there need to be fewer administrative barriers and more humans than pencils and paper.
Would you say there are still misconceptions around what chronic pain is?
Oui.
Yes. Whether you're a member of the armed forces or a civilian, it's very complicated to understand chronic pain. It's still seen as a weakness. And I would say it's in the same place that mental health was 20 years ago. 20 years ago, it was shameful to be depressed or to be bipolar. Now it's a lot better accepted. Chronic pain is still seen by civilians and even more so by members of the armed forces as a weakness, as someone who's lacking willpower. But that's so false. And so we've got a lot of education to do for everyone, including healthcare professionals.
30 seconds left. So how would challenges related to chronic pain affect other areas of a veteran's life?
La douleur chronique, ça impacte la vie.
Chronic pain affects one's personal life, one's family life, one's sexual life, and one's image of oneself. it affects a person's entire life, whether you're a civilian or a veteran. And for veterans, there's also the operational stress notion, the mental health issue, a misunderstanding of military culture, and a misunderstanding of the importance of the family unit and the group unit. Thank you, Dr. Pinot. Thank you very much. For 2.5 minutes, Ms. Godreau. Thank you. I'd like to draw a parallel. So we're parliamentarians. We're elected through our democracy by the people. We have privileges. We may have access to a pension. But whether we stop being a member or if we're not reelected, we're told what you've done, we're going to forget it. You're not going to have a pension. Go home. You're no name now. So there's going to be a day when I'm no longer a member, and I'll have to ask myself, who am I? And then perhaps I'll say, oh, is this what veterans experience? I wanted to help, and so you tried to save lives. And so we call this compassion, and I'm looking for it. But I'm going to be positive in spite of all of this. At the end of the day, we need to think about the future generations. And in politics, if we look toward the future, and if we establish a correlation between whether we have serious needs in terms of defense, and if the current veterans community is saying that we're going to tell our children, don't join the forces, even if it's an extraordinary experience in someone's life. And if we realize that we're going to have concerns for the next generation, well, you know what? Then this is the time where we're going to wake up. So I hope from now until then that you will be consulted and that we will address these issues. I hope that's the case, and I'm hopeful. I've got a last question for Ms. Pinard. Did I understand correctly that in Quebec, the CNSST has had changes?
Au niveau de la culture.
And in terms of culture, how has this contributed to allowing you to better do your work? 20 seconds. A number of years ago, the CNESST had programs which are fairly rigid, which were similar to what we have now. And there was a certain program for certain patients, and we realized that people were deteriorating. And so there was no mental health care. It was a one-size-fits-all approach. I'm very sorry, Dr. Pinard. My apologies.
So I just have to say that in this room today, a bit of a frustration that I've seen personally is that not one person on the government side has asked the veteran in this room what can be done better to serve the veterans that have fought for this country. So I'm going to do that. You said you're not expecting thank you before I continue for your service. You said in your opening statement you're not expecting VAC to do more, but I think we can expect to do better. I think we can agree that there's an expectation to do better. With PCVRS, do you think it's designed to help veterans or just check a box and put them through a program regardless of if that program worked for them or not? Yes. So do you think a better way is to listen to veterans like you with the lived experience and the help that is required, take that guidance, turn it into systems that work for you through better management through VAC so that we can serve you better?
100%, and I can do better than that. I've been working tirelessly for 6 years with veterans from across the planet, building programs, building recovery programs. I more or less fixed my chronic pain on my own. I've been to Mexico, I've been to the United States. They're significantly further ahead than us. And that's because they actually listen to their veterans. It's 100% the way forward. I don't understand how VAC isolates itself from the population that it's actually mandated to serve. And until we do that, we're not going to get the care that we're actually expecting, because how do you do it when you don't have the input from the actual end users? So yeah, I 100% agree with your point there.
You also said in your opening statement that you're rallying veterans to put their boots back on and fight for themselves with a government that you fought for yourselves. And to me, that's incredibly disheartening. I think moving forward, we need a government to put their boots on, listen to our veterans, and make changes that better support the needs and services that you require when you come back into community. Can you give me a top two, just today, a top two starting points to be able to do that for veterans?
From the VAC perspective?
Yeah.
I would say start reaching out to the actual community, show up to the events. We have events. VAC doesn't show up. It's like they're scared of us. I've been to plenty of VAC events, and I don't see folks like myself, meaning I consider myself that 0.01%. Tattoos on the neck, like we were war fighters, and like we weren't there to protect people per se. We were there to fight a war. So we're aggressive. We look scary. That's okay. That's who we are. But come to where we're at. That'd be the first thing. And the second thing would be the model of care is the wrong model. We're trying to solve the wrong problem. We're looking at the veteran like this precious China doll. And like I said, it's emasculating. It is emasculating because I'm a war fighter. I will never not be a war fighter. What I did is what I did. I want to move on. I want to rebuild. I want to be stronger. I don't want to be put in this box of therapy and drugs and talk about my problems. How do I build back better? So the model itself needs to be reevaluated at VAC. And that model exists if you just look outside the box. And again, that comes down to talking with the community and talking with folks like myself who've been doing this for years, and I'd be happy to share what I know with VAC anytime, any place.
Thank you so much. I'm just going to take my last moments here to, again, thank you for your service, and to the gentleman also in the room, thank you for your service as well. I think there's a better way, and I really do hope that the government takes what you have to say today and we'll put a report together in this committee and decide to make better changes for veterans in our community. Thank you for your time.
Thank
Mr.
you.
Moore.
Thank you very much. Pour les dernières minutes.
And for our last few minutes, Mr. Saint-Pierre. Perfect. I'll hope to have 3 or 4 minutes if possible. Mr. Morrow, I'm going to ask my questions in French because you're from Montreal, and so I assume you love the Habs. So just wanted to say that because we're in the playoffs. Now I have my clip.
Honnêtement, merci pour votre service.
Honestly, thank you for your service for Canada. And thank you for your podcast. I think it's very important to establish the link between mental and physical health. This is something that I'm interested in personally. My colleagues tease me when I do push-ups in the house. But I do it because I think it's important to exercise. It's a good way to manage stress. It makes us be better MPs. And as my colleagues know, I participate in ultra marathons. It's a good way to stay in shape. And I hope that Mr. Richards will join me on the next one. And I'm inspired by certain runners like David Goggins, who has done many ultramarathons, Moab, and he was in the American Armed Forces. He's someone who shows a way to manage stress after combat. So I'd just like to congratulate you for the work that you do, because on a personal level, it is relevant to me. I'm curious, could you speak for Canadians, why is maintaining physical health after combat important in order to maintain one's mental health? Thank you for the question. Honestly, that's the best way to heal. Instead of just taking care of your mental health, the Greeks and the Romans knew 2,000 or 3,000 years ago that if you're not in good shape, then your mental health will be affected.
Pas nécessairement à l'aise.
So, for veterans who
Leur physique,
aren't necessarily comfortable with their physical health as a result of injury, as a result of chronic pain. For me,
uniquement dans une position parce que
veterans are in a unique position because they were all in shape. But now that they're veterans, it's very likely that they've put on quite a bit of weight, and then they're in pain, and they've got various other issues.
Promote la santé physique pour les veterans.
So just to promote physical health for veterans, this would be an excellent approach in order to improve mental health. For me, it's clear, but I think the government needs to be guided because the research is clear. It will reduce suicides if we focus on physical health instead of just mental health. Thank you. Do I still have one more minute? Just one last question for Ms. Pinard. What does a positive result look like for a veteran who is looking for chronic pain treatment? Well, in chronic pain, well, victory against chronic pain doesn't mean the absence of chronic pain. We assess the improvements in one's quality of life and one's functional abilities because, unfortunately, chronic pain will often remain. We try to reduce it, and not just with medication. And I support the importance of being in good shape. It's very important. But we take a look at the improvement in terms of functional abilities, the resumption of significant activities, even simply just going to one's child's hockey game or to a concert. But that's victory. And gradually we can resume activities. But if the pain's been there for 20 years, it's kind of like putting on weight. We can't just put on weight over 20 years and try to lose it over a few weeks. So it's a long process. And it's not by burning people out that will improve them. We need to listen to them and establish a joint plan with them in order to meet their needs. Thank you, Ms. Pinard.
Ceci conclut pour nos témoins. Je voudrais juste mentionner.
So that is it for our witnesses. I'd just like to mention to Mr. Morrow, I was at the launch for the veterans event along with a number of my colleagues, including Mr. Casey.
And well, to all of us, we thank you for your service. But he also mentioned to all of us that the service continues to give. So I say thank you for your service, but also to all the service that you continue giving, sir. So thank you very much. À nos autres témoins, thank you very much.
To our other witnesses.
I do have one thing that before we end, notre prochaine réunion aura lieu le...
Our next meeting will take place on April 27th. We will be having the Minister of VAC and representatives from VAC for a review of 2026-2027 main estimates and the subjects of the supplementary estimates. So does the committee wish to adjourn the meeting?